Coming up on our premiere episode of the THEINDIEWAVE podcast, we get a chance to talk with Glacer FM Artist of the Year, JOWYMER, about her adventures in rock and roll and her post-military life as an indie rocker, who is showing us that girls do indeed just want to have fun, even as she approaches the big 6-0. That's coming up on this episode of the THEINDIEWAVE podcast. The THEINDIEWAVE podcast with That Sailing Guy. That Sailing Guy, also known as Christopher German. In partnership with Glacer FM and broadcasting from the birthplace of grunge, Aberdeen, Washington. Welcome to the THEINDIEWAVE podcast.
Bridge, top has sprung a leak, and the animals I've trapped.
Welcome to the very first episode of the THEINDIEWAVE podcast with me, That Sailing Guy. I'm Chris German. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I hope you're with your loved ones today. You know, for the longest time, I suffered with ADHD, and by virtue of that unknown superhero power, I was all about sailing. But in my younger days, I had quite an affinity for and a bit of time playing instruments and singing. Well, now that I'm relieved of my ADHD confusion, and thanks to the miracle of modern medicine and a boatload of therapy and coaching to boot, I'm making my best efforts to rejoin the world of music, which I so desperately missed. And as part of my renaissance of self, I'm launching this podcast as an homage to the creator economy and the decentralized world in all its democratic promise. Never before in human history has it been more possible to express yourself and your brand of creation, whether it's literature, theater, music, or painting. Between the advent of NFTs, the emergence of Web 3.0, and thanks to platforms like Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, and the Google Marketplace, along with the monetization of data by the YouTubes and the Facebooks of the world, never before has the common man or woman had a chance to loose the bonds of mediocrity and reach for the stars, for all the world to see and appreciate. I happened upon this understanding of this emerging economic reality in the fog of the pandemic, in a trailer parked in the Utah desert, where I wrote my first novel and started my first podcast. It was cemented in my mind, however, when I ran the Crypto Nightly News and I learned of the democratic tide that is washing over the financial world as well as the creative world. And the light finally went off when I walked along the muddy banks of the Wyshkariver here in Aberdeen, Washington, where I communed with the spirit of the father of grunge himself, Kurt Cobain, who got his start playing air guitar as a young boy under a rain-soaked tarp under the bridge that crosses that storied river in his commemorative park a few blocks away from where I'm filming this episode. Oh, but for the times. I wonder how many people might have pursued their dreams of playing music or writing books. I wonder how many people trudged through life at 9-to-5 jobs they hated for so many years, keeping their light undercover and never sharing their voice with the world because of the nature of the commercial media and its judgmental strangulation of the creative minds of the world. I trudged the empty walk of irrelevance for too long now in my life due to my undiagnosed ADHD. And I refuse to spend one more day burying my creativity away under the yoke of my disability. And so I call to all who yearn to be heard and all who struggle to release the song that sings within their soul to join me each week for a sit down to talk music and song and chat about the world that is the indie music industry. This podcast is dedicated to the independent singers and songwriters out there who work tirelessly to share their music with the world and struggle to reach their fan base without the benefit of the commercial music producers and radio gods of Christmas past. I summon the spirits of the jazz kings of the 1920s, the big band players of the 1940s, the rock and rollers of the 50s and 60s. I call to the brothers and sisters of the 1970s Motown scene and the neo-punks of the 1980s, and I reach all the way up to the alternative angst of the 90s and almost famous peoples of the 2000s, and to every soul that braves the deafening silence of the Google algorithm and the mind-numbing oblivion of internet irrelevance to share their work, despite the deafening tide of static that hides each of our individual greatnesses from the world. Join me each week as we explore the world of indie music and hear some of the freshest and newest sounds that you will likely never, ever hear on your car stereo, and talk with the artists who create those works with a bravery and steadiness of heart to believe in a dream that someday they will be able to live free and independently by sharing the music of their soul with the world. That is what the Indie Wave podcast is all about, and I invite you to subscribe and play along each and every week. Now, for this first episode, I got a chance to chat with a fabulous musician who is making music after a life defending our nation in the U.S. military. She has burst on the scene this year as the 2022 Glacer FM Artist of the Year and combines opera 50 sensibilities with seductive bluesy style, a diva-esque devil-may-care attitude with a classic American rock and roll sound that she clearly shares with the likes of her Jersey neighbors, including Bruce Springsteen and John Bon Jovi himself. It is my great pleasure to kick off this first episode of the Indie Wave podcast with an interview I shot with the lady who is putting soul back on the airwaves with her music and acting, the very lovely, the amazingly talented JOWYMER. For those of you who haven't yet sipped the JOWYMER Kool-Aid quite yet, I'm going to introduce her with one of my favorite cuts and a piece that is tearing up the Glacer FM charts and topping her playlists on Spotify and Pandora. Without further ado, please take a listen to, I dare say, the newest indie goddess that's going to go gold someday. You heard it here first. JOWYMER, and this is her hit song, Dark Heart.
Buried deep beneath your skin, hurt can only fester from within. Believe the feelings stolen by a thief. Pain's a careless whisper turning into grief. Naked, landscape cutting thin. Anger, burning time and time again. Heartache, this type of wound won't set you free. This madness, you and me, we're not meant to be.
Let me start off by telling you that I actually featured you on the Crypto Nightly News before you were the Glacer FM Artist of the Year, and you are in fact now the Glacer FM Artist of the Year, and you're blowing up all over the place, and I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so grateful to be here. Let me just tell you, you know what? I'm I'm making almost 60 a new sexy. So there you go.
Well, that's perfect because I'm approaching 50. So the sexier 60 is, the better it is for me too.
Yeah. You know what? I'm almost 60 and I'm like, still having a good time with music and rock and roll. So there you go.
Well, honestly, actually, I'm entering the music world again for myself for the first time at the tender age of 46, 47 this year. And I'm going to start a brass quintet here in Aberdeen, Washington, where we're broadcasting this thing from. And I won't probably be as sexy as you, but I'll do my best. How about that?
You know what? I was actually in the military and I was stationed in Bremerton for a couple of years. So I'm super excited to be part of that, and just wanted to share that, I love Bremerton and it was such a great place for me to be stationed. So just wanted to share that with you. So I didn't know if you knew that.
I only can hope that Bremerton loves you as much as the rest of the world does, because you're just firing up on all levels here. I was just checking out your YouTube channel before I got on air with you, and you're doing amazing things, and we want to talk to the world about that.
Yeah. So I've been around the Asbury Park music scene for a while, about 20 something years. I got out of the military and I got remarried and moved to Freehold, which is where Springsteen is from. So, but there's not too many women here that actually, write, play, and sing. And I play multiple instruments. So it was really a joyful thing to be part of the music scene here in New Jersey. And it's been joyful since I've been back to the East Coast, but I sure do miss the Pacific Northwest. I just want to say that.
We just had this amazing sun shower that just came through a couple hours ago, and it's breathtaking out here this time of year because there's, quite frankly, it's not that many people wandering around here because it's cold and wet and rainy, but it is absolutely a spectacular place to live.
Yeah, I loved it there. Everyone's like, why do you like it there? I was like, well, it's beautiful. And they're like, doesn't it rain all the time? I'm like, not all the time. Okay. It has its moments of beauty. And just taking the ferry from Seattle over to Bremerton and then Bainbridge Island, it just is beautiful. So I'm not sure how many people have had the opportunity to do that, but I have, and I just loved it there. So
well, let's get down to nuts and bolts here, because you have your discography is on YouTube is a bit limited, but at the same time, I think the sound is absolutely spectacular. I love your voice. I love what you put out there. I love your vibe. I love all that kinds of good stuff. And I was happy to feature you on the Crypto Nightly News when I did so. And now I have a whole new podcast, The Indie Wave. And you are officially now the Glacer FM Artist of 2022. How does that feel?
Oh my God. So I love the Glacer FM people because they totally support all the DIY musicians. So while I live in a really affluent area for music, okay, so Springsteen doesn't live too far from me, and Bon Jovi-ville, that, he's not too far from me, and Southside and Gary U.S. Bonds, but there's not too many women in the area that really step up with their game. So, but I've worked with some really wonderful people. John Liedersdorf, Mark Swirsky, two-time Grammy winner, worked with Joe Cocker for many, many years.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. And he decided, he's like, Joe, he said to me, he goes, Joe, you're female Joe Cocker, so let's do this. So I was like, okay, let's do this, And so Mark Swirsky, my producer on my second album, which is SLG. The first album was John Liedersdorf, who was with several bands after Springsteen, Nine South, and a bunch of wonderful other musicians here in the Asbury Park, New Jersey, Central Jersey Shore area. There's not too many women, and so they took me under their wing, sorta, and said, okay, Joe, let's do this. And it's been an amazing ride so far, and how grateful I am to work with people like Willie Nile and Johnny Paisano and all these wonderful Jersey Shore musicians.
Well, tell me this. How did you get your chops started? How did you get you're military, so obviously you're not tearing up the nightclub scene while you're up defending the country. So how did you get into the whole music scene, and where did that all come from?
So I actually was a Juilliard prep student in high school, and I was one of the few women in my school that were in Juilliard prep. And I ended up going to Juilliard for one semester, but then I thought, you know what, this is too competitive. It wasn't fun anymore. I didn't like it. And so I decided to follow a young man into the Navy.
It's always love. That's always the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah, people like, you should write a story, Joe, but I don't want to write a story because I feel like every woman has a love story. Okay. So I followed this guy into the Navy, and he got stationed in the Philippines, and they sent me to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And I realized how much I loved the military life, coming from a military family. My father, my uncles, my father's oldest brother flew on the Memphis Belle Tour 2. He was the second crew on the Memphis Belle. So I have some military history behind my family. Really exciting. And I never thought that I would stay in, but I stayed in for 4, enlisted for 2 more, and then enlisted for reserve duty for another 8 years. And it was a really wonderful time. And at that time, I married a man who fathered my child. And things get a little crazy when you're military, and it didn't work out. So I got out of the military, got out of that marriage, and remarried to a man who totally loved music. His name is my husband, Dan.
Yeah.
And I would, sit in this room here and play my guitar and play my piano. And he'd be like, we need to record this stuff because it's really, really good. And I was like, no, I'm not good enough. And, he was like, yeah, it is, So that's when we reached out to John Liedersdorf, who owns Lake House Music here in Asbury Park. And he was part of Line Drive and a couple other bands, really great drummer, but he decided to start to produce music. Brought my music to him in 2009 and didn't think it was worth anything, but he thought it was worth a shot. And we recorded Living with Scars, and that CD took off like wildfire. There weren't any women in this area or in the Northeast that were doing what I was doing, playing guitar, piano, writing, harmonica, all this other stuff. And he was like, you're amazing. And the music just took off, and I started traveling with it along with sync licensing. And next thing I knew, I had 3 or 4 20 or 30 seconds of snippets for various things, whether it was Fox NASCAR Sunday, or it was The Affair on HBO, or True Blood, or Rookie Blue in Syndicate. So that's where I started to push my music. It's a man's world here at the Jersey Shore. So there weren't too many women playing around. Maybe Pam McCoy, maybe Jenny Barnes, a couple of us. But
you're doing some amazing things now. I think, especially with the advent of this creator economy that we're coming into right now, and with the various and sundry ways that people are getting their music out there through the independent channels, and you're just like the poster child for success with that right now. So talk to me a little bit about that. What are you doing on the indie scene? How did you and Glacer FM hook up together, and how's it going for you right now?
So Glacer FM looks at the DIY musicians, and I just started to submit my music, and they loved it. They just loved my voice and the vibe and everything. And then recently, during COVID, because COVID shut everything down, as we all know, right?
Yeah.
So what happened was, they started to have some of these sync licensing Zoom calls where there were like 10 or 15 women across the country who were playing their music on these Zoom calls and such. And I had my youngest son is a was a film student, and he graduated from college, and he was like, Mom, you need to try this. You need to try this. You need to try this. And so I did. And I just started submitting music with music video and making videos and such. And I met a woman on one of these calls. Her name is Janet Brooks. She goes by Janet B. Very cool, very Bill Evans like piano playing.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to do this thing for what they call MeowCon, where there were a lot of women on the call, but you had to play live. You had to submit a video. You had to have X amount of sync licensing. And next thing I knew, I was one of the women on the call, and it was amazing. You know, I had an opportunity to connect with other women who are trying to get their music heard. And next thing I know, Janet Brooks and I wrote a song together called Dark Heart. And I reached out to some of my son's friends, and they brought in some video based on how the music sounded. And we put together Dark Heart. And next thing I know, Glacier picked me up earlier for some of my music, but when they heard Dark Heart, they were like, oh my God, this is, you know, we're looking for stuff like this. So, you know, I think what happened was they heard my music, my recorded music, and they loved it because it was something totally different. But then they saw what I was able to self-produce and self-make with the video and everything. And they were like, whoa, this is like, not everybody does this. So it was super exciting. And I totally did not expect to be the artist of the year. I just thought, okay, you know, here's my music, take a listen, here's my video. And they just really support the DIY musicians. And you know, for that I'm grateful, because there's not too many folks out there that look at the women. You know, I feel like a lot of women in music today are have to take a direction that they're not comfortable with, maybe objectifying themselves a little bit. And I don't really care, because I feel like it's about the music. Doesn't anybody want to hear the truth in the music anymore? So, you know, I just took a chance and rolled the dice, and they loved it. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. So.
Well, they're doing amazing things with your music on there. I think that you're blowing their charts up all over the place, and that's why they did that for you. But how are you doing on other places like Spotify? How are you doing on getting it heard in other venues?
So I am on Spotify. I am on Amazon MP3. I'm out there on CD Baby. I'm all over the place, but you just have to keep pushing it. The marketing piece of it is you just have to keep pushing and directing and redirecting and submitting and syncing and all that. And I think that has been, you know, a piece of the music that I just keep pushing. And there's, for every one of me, there's 5 others, you know what I mean? So you just have, I feel like the quality of music has to be there. There has to be specific pieces of the music that people are looking for. And with regards to sync licensing, okay, so like if I'm gonna have something on Fox NASCAR Sunday, I have to listen to my songs and say, okay, this piece here is pretty badass, okay, but this piece here is not as badass. So, you know, you have to just understand your marketing and your dynamic and what people are looking for. And I think with regards to Glacier FM, they listen for all of that. Right. Like they listen to all of it, and that's what makes them special versus just the average like Joe Schmo syncing company. So I'm listed with quite a few. I feel like overseas, meaning Belgium, France, Europe, they love the women who can play rock, sing, you know, all that stuff, and that's where it kind of goes first. And then they start to look over in Europe, and then they hear, oh, this one's an American, so let's go back here and see what she's doing. And I think that's what happens with Glacier FM, because people listen to them all over the world, and then they hear this type of music overseas, and they're like, oh my God, that song is amazing. This is what we're after. Whereas in the US, it's a little bit different vibe. You know what I mean? So
well, and that's exactly the purpose of this podcast, is to really share the music with the world that the world may not otherwise hear, especially because we support everything that Glacer FM is doing with all of that. And quite frankly, I think an artist like you you have so much polish, you have so much, je ne sais quoi, as the French might say. You really put it out there, and you make it sound good. You put a quality product out there, and I think you're right. I think if you just bust your butt and put the best damn product you can out there, eventually it will wind up in the right ears and on the right playlist, and it will make it happen. But in the meantime, I've watched a bunch of your live stuff going on. I haven't seen you live in person, but you're a lot of fun to watch. You're a lot of fun to play with, and you're a lot of fun to listen to. So I hope you keep doing all this stuff. And I'm gonna do my best to try and make the world find out about you too.
Oh, you know what? I feel like people want to be entertained. They want to have fun. Like, okay, so I live in the land of Springsteen. Okay. The people that come to see me are not going to obviously pay like $3,000 or $4,000 a ticket to come and see me, even though I can, I can play multiple instruments. I'm an actor as well. I work for a regional theater here in New Jersey. And, but I feel like when people come to see me, they want to be brought in. They don't want to be entertained. It's a whole new level, I think, at this point. They want to feel part of your world, I guess. They want to understand why you wrote that song, how you wrote that song, what that song means. Can they relate to it? So what I learned, at least from both of my producers, John Liedersdorf and Mark Swirsky, is that there's truth in the lyrics.
Yeah.
People want to feel. They want to feel. And they want to be able to have some sort of release from those feelings. And for me, I'm not very good. I'll be honest with you. I'm not very good with expressing my feelings verbally, right? So like if my husband and I have an argument, right? I'm not going to lie. I'm like clam right up. Okay. But I can write about that. And I feel like people understand the writing piece of it, like that kiss. Okay. So when you're first dating somebody and you have that first kiss, okay, that first kiss really matters in some respect. It sets the tone for the entire relationship. So that's where I kind of scrape the scab away and start to write about that. Does that make sense? I think
that makes a ton of sense. And I think what I like to do right now is I would like to share one of your performances with the world. And you might not remember this piece, but you did a cover of "Stop Dragging My Heart Around" that I think really illustrates what you're talking about. And we're gonna end this interview with that song, and I'm gonna show the world the passion that you have behind that guitar and how you can do that kind of thing. Do you mind if I do that?
Not at all. Go right ahead. Thank you so much.
Well, Joe Wymer, you are absolutely a pleasure to speak with, and I want to congratulate you again on being the Glacer FM Artist of 2022. That is, I think it's a tremendous honor because, ultimately, I mean, there's not enough support for the people that haven't necessarily hit the top echelon. But in the meantime, there's a hell of a lot of talent that's all around the world, and Glacer FM is making sure that you're getting your light shined. So I'm going to try to do the same for you.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here, and thanks for asking me to be here.
Well, it is my pleasure, and tune into the Indie Wave if you ever want to hear any other artists that are as amazing and as fabulous as you are. But in the meantime, let me get with that track going right now. Stop Dragging My Heart Around, Joe Wymer. Tune in, folks. This is a dynamic woman to listen to, and you're going to have a fun time listening to this thing. Watch what I have going right now.
My Snow Day cover. Here we go.
Baby, you come knocking
stop dragging my heart.
I'm wet. The Indie Wave is a Charted Life production.